Hello, my name is Robert Dean Steele, and this is your daily Bible class. We're looking at the parables of Jesus. I'm reading to you today from Luke chapter 7, verses 41 to 43. This is what it says there. Now, the background behind this was simply this, that now one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, so he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a woman who had lived a very sinful life in that town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume, and as she stood there behind at his feet, she was weeping, and she began to wipe Jesus' feet with her tears, and wiped them with her hair, kissing them and pouring perfume. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, and that she is a sinner." And this is where Jesus gives the parable. He said, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. "Two men owed money to a certain moneylender. One of him owed 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither one of them had to pay him back, so he canceled the debts. Now, which one of them loved him more?" Simon said, "I suppose the one who had a bigger debt." Jesus says, "You have answered correctly." And then he turned to this woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your home. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wept my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not even give me even that much." And so he goes on to say there, "You did not pour oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet." Then he goes on to say, "Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who has been forgiven much loves little." Then he says, "But he who has been forgiven much forgives much." Then Jesus said, "Your sins are forgiven." Well, there is, of course, the context of the entire situation. A woman had come, Simon, the Pharisee, had invited Jesus to come to his house. And then this woman from that same town comes in, and she breaks an alabaster bar over Jesus' feet, and she wipes his feet with her tears and his feet with her hair. And Simon gets all bent out of shape and says, if Jesus was a prophet, he would know what kind of woman she was. Well, of course, Jesus talks about the very fact that there were two men who owed this man much money. And one was little and one was much. And the fact was that he canceled both their debts. And so, of course, Jesus answered the question, or asked the question. He said, "So who loved this person more?" He said, obviously, Simon says, the person who was forgiven more. So you see what Jesus was pointing out is the fact that those that are forgiven much, love much. Those who are forgiven little, love little. It has to do with, you say, well, how does that affect me today? Well, it's very simply this. You need to understand how much you have been forgiven. There are people who are good living people, and they've tried to follow some sort of moral code all their lives. And so when they give their lives to Jesus Christ, all they're thinking is, well, I have, just added Jesus to my situation. And then there are those who are, real sinners. We're talking the real low life, and they come to know Jesus. And so, obviously, Jesus forgave them much. What Jesus is talking about here, though, is simply this, is an understanding of how much you have been forgiven. It doesn't matter if you are the best, nicest person around. You're still a sinner. And whether you are what we would call the low of the earth, you know what? Your sins are still sins. God is no respecter of person. There's no measure of sins. We like to categorize sins. We like to put sins in some sort of, category. I mean, lying is down here and murder is up there. But you know what? Whenever we have the sins brought forward, lying, dishonesty, gossip, those so-called small sins are in the same category as the murderers, the same category as the perverts. You know what? What God is saying is there is no measure of sin. Sin is still sin, whether it's a small one, as you consider, or a large one, as you consider. And so when you know you've been forgiven much, whether you're a good person or a rotten person, you need to know that the same God who forgave you of all your sins, whether you consider them minor or major. And when you have that perspective, you really understand how much God really loves you. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. You have everlasting life because of God's love. And what you need to understand is how much your sins have been forgiven. Jesus Christ died because you couldn't save yourself. If you could have saved yourself, there would have been no reason for Jesus to come. But because you couldn't save yourself, Jesus Christ came. And whether you consider yourselves a great sinner or just a passable sinner, you're still a sinner. And God saved you. And it's all perspective. So, understand how much he loved you. And in return, love him. Love him with every fiber of your being. And understand how much you've been forgiven. Simon didn't get that day, but the woman who broke the alabaster bottle over Jesus' feet and over his head and did all those things, she understood. I hope that you understand too. Those who have been forgiven much, whether it's their perspective that they haven't been forgiven much or not. You have been forgiven much. That's what this parable is all about. My name is Robert Dean Steele. This is your daily Bible class. You have yourself a great and godly day.